Hello, everyone. Hope you're doing well today. Today, we are going to take a look at something that my guess is most of you have heard a fair amount about over the years, but we'll try to dive in a little bit deeper, maybe in some ways, and see if we can apply it. That's called the scientific method. And a lot of our courses, really about, well, how and why do we do science? And what's the process that's included in it? And that's one of the things the scientific method provides for us. Now, don't get confused and think that there's only one way to do science and that there's only a one step by step formula that discovers everything. And you're going to see different versions of the scientific method itself. But in general, there's just kind of an overall flow that a lot of scientific processes go through. And that's what we're going to take a look at and see if we can't put it into practice a little bit today. Um, you see here, the scientific method is kind of considered to be an ongoing process. It's not something that is just done and you have an end product that finishes things with. It continues on. It is ongoing. It is fluid, and it kind of is a circular motion that it just keeps building. We start out kind of usually making some observations, and those observations are going to be something we see in nature, and uh, we try to make sense of it. And we start questioning, the hows and the whys in terms of what we're witnessing, and then from there we draw on kind of our knowledge and research, and start trying to think of, well, how do we explain that? We come with educated guesses, of course, that we call hypotheses. And from there, in order to know if our hypothesis is correct, we've got to test it. And so we start getting into the experimentation phase. And we uh, put, put our hypotheses to the test and in different ways and shapes and forms. And sometimes they pan out, sometimes they don't, and we have to refine or alter or sometimes just reject our hypothesis. Doesn't mean that the process stops. It just means that we have to redevelop a new hypothesis, and we enter the cycle again. And sometimes the material or the results do promote our hypothesis, and we build from there. And so it's an ongoing thing, and science keeps building on itself. So we kind of tend to start out with, using our senses to make some sort of observation. We hear something, we see something, we taste something, or we smell it. And uh, at that point, then we want to, well, learn how the world works. That's what science does, try to explain that. And so we need to start asking questions. How does that happen? Why does that happen? What's going on here? And once we start doing those questions, we can, narrow in maybe specific parts of it. You know, how come it happens when it's a certain temperature, or why does this only happen uh, to green colored things? Whatever it might happen to be, we can start really kind of narrowing our questions and uh, really trying to direct our focus in terms of figuring things out. And then, of course, once we put our best guess to work and what we think is the answer, we formulate this hypothesis or educated guess. Now, the hypothesis only works if we can make a hypothesis that is testable, that we can actually try it out and somehow find out whether it holds water or not, or if it's inaccurate or just needs to be altered some way. And so, in order to test a hypothesis, of course, that's where we start doing experiments. And there are a number of vocabulary terms that we're going to be getting into with experimentation. You're going to hear about control and control groups and manipulated variables and responding variables and so forth. But experiments, of course, are going to be part of what we do in the science lab to try to find out if what we believe in our hypothesis is true. Now, when we do our experiment, then we got to try to make some sense out of it. And we got to take a look at the data that we gather in that experiment. Sometimes it's going to be uh, quantitative data where there are numbers attached. Sometimes there's going to be qualitative data, which doesn't have numbers. But throughout it all, we got to try to find meaning there. And sometimes when we do the experiment, the hypothesis is supported, in which case then maybe we take a little different angle at it. We expand it and try to look and see, well, what can we find out further about it? And so we can run some more experiments. If the hypothesis is not supported by our experiments, then we got to go back and we got to change things. But now when we make our hypothesis, we're a little bit smarter. And so we have a little bit better hypothesis. And eventually, hopefully we are able to design experiments that can test it well, and they do hold water. And then you start hearing words called theories, which are kind of well-established and supported hypotheses. Well, we're going to do a little activity today where you are going to get asked to witness and observe some discrepant events. And that might be a foreign word to you, but a discrepant event is just an event that maybe surprises people a little bit. It's a surprising, and you see that word paradoxical outcome. It's kind of not expected. And there are a lot of things in this world that take place that maybe we didn't really know what happened. And that, of course, is going to make our imaginations and the scientists in you try to wonder, well, why does it do that? How does that work? And so you're going to see a series of discrepant events. There are 4 of them on this little video clip that you're going to be assigned. And then you're going to try to apply the scientific method to answer that question, why? You're going to get asked to record your observations. You're going to be asked to put together some questions that might be interesting about what you saw. Make a hypothesis around one of those questions, what you think is the explanation, and then design an experiment to test your hypothesis. The video clips are on a little Edpuzzle. Some of you might be familiar with Edpuzzle. I'm very new to Edpuzzle, admittedly. This is actually my first Edpuzzle video clip that I've entered. But I think it looks like a great tool that we'll be able to include in future assignments. But during the clip, there will be questions that you can kind of answer and try to do your best to see what you get. You won't be graded on those so much. But after each clip, I do want you to fill in the Google Doc assignment that is going to be found on Schoology about each of the 4 different discrepant events that are witnessed in the video. And I want you to, as we mentioned before, we're going to try to analyze it using the scientific method. I want you to make some observations, what you saw happen. List about at least 3 things for each. I want you to come up with a few questions for each in regards to aspects of it, or how and why and what and how it might work. I want you to develop a hypothesis to one of your questions. I believe this happened because of whatever it might happen to be. And then you're going to have to design and devise an experiment that could actually test that hypothesis. Now, you're not going to actually have to do the experiment. We just want you to put an experiment together, put together an overview of the experiment and procedures that you could use that would test it. Let me know if you have any questions. Good luck and have fun.